When my sister Maya and I were kicked out, the world didn't end with a bang. It ended with the quiet final click of a deadbolt. I was 16. She was 14. Our foster mother, Mrs. Gable, stood on the other side of the door, her face a mask of strained patience, not cruelty. "I'm sorry, Liam," she had said, her voice thin as onion skin. "It's just not working. The agency will find you something else." 2 duffel bags sat on the cracked porch step beside us, containing the sum total of our lives. Clothes, a few worn paperbacks, Maya's sketchbook, and $112 I had saved from a summer job bagging groceries. The agency wouldn't find us for days, and she knew it. It was a Friday. This was a quiet, institutional kind of abandonment. We were a problem being deferred until Monday morning. What we did next, everyone called it insane. They called it a mistake born of desperation. But what we found inside a tower of rust and ruin wasn't just a home. It was the truth that had been kept from us our entire lives. If you've ever felt lost, like a piece of paper the world was trying to crumple up and throw away, then maybe you'll understand our story. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in second chances, because this is a story about building one. Rivet by Rusty Rivet. The November air was sharp, biting at our exposed skin. It carried the smell of damp leaves and car exhaust, the signature scent of a world that was moving on without you. Maya shivered, pulling the thin sleeves of her hoodie down over her hands. She didn't say anything. She hadn't said much for months. The silence was her armor, a way of making herself smaller, less of a target. I hated it, but I understood it. In the system, you learn that noise gets you noticed, and being noticed rarely leads to anything good. I slung my bag over one shoulder and picked up hers. "Come on," I said, my voice trying for a confidence I didn't feel. "Bus station. We'll figure it out." Figure what out? I had no idea. The $112 felt like a mountain of cash and a pittance at the same time. It was enough to buy us a few nights of not being on the street, but it was also a countdown timer. Every dollar spent was a second ticking away. The city shelter was exactly what you'd expect. It smelled of bleach and despair. The cots were lined up in neat, impersonal rows, each one a tiny island in a sea of quiet misery. We were given 2, side by side. That first night I lay awake for hours, listening to the symphony of the displaced, coughing, muttering, the soft weeping of a woman a few beds down. Maya was curled into a tight ball, facing the wall, her sketchbook clutched to her chest. I was the older brother. I was supposed to have a plan. I was supposed to protect her. And as I lay there in the dark, the weight of my failure was a physical thing, pressing down on my chest until it was hard to breathe. We spent 3 days there, 3 days of eating watery soup and stale bread, of avoiding eye contact, of feeling the last remnants of our childhood sand away. On the 3rd day, I saw it, pinned to a corkboard, overflowing with faded job postings and housing assistance flyers, was a notice from the county. It was printed on cheap gray paper, the ink already starting to blur. "Municipal Surplus Auction," the heading read. I scanned the list of items. Used office furniture, a decommissioned police car, a set of traffic lights. My eyes were about to move on when I saw the last entry. Lot number 47, 1, disused water tower and adjacent pump house. Parcel 7B, Oakhaven, as is. Minimum bid, $1. The idea was a spark in the overwhelming darkness. It was insane. It was stupid. It was, without a doubt, the most ridiculous thought I had ever had. A water tower? What would 2 homeless kids do with a rusted-out water tower in a town I'd never even heard of? But the words parcel and pump house stuck in my head. A parcel meant land. A pump house meant 4 walls and a roof. It was more than we had. I tore the flyer from the board and took it back to our cots. Maya was sketching, her pencil flying across the page. She was drawing a bird trapped in a cage made of twisted, thorny vines. I sat down on the edge of her cot. "Maya," I whispered, "look at this." She glanced at the paper, her expression blank, and then went back to her drawing. "It's junk, Liam." "It's a place," I insisted, my voice getting a little louder. "It's a pump house. It's got to be better than this. It's ours. Or it could be." She finally looked up, her gray eyes searching my face, looking for the joke, the lie. She saw I was serious. The thought hung in the air between us, a fragile, impossible bubble. Owning something. Not being at the mercy of a Mrs. Gable or a shelter administrator. The idea was terrifying, but it was also the first glimmer of light I'd seen in years. "How much?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Minimum bid is $1, I said. "We can bid 5, just to be safe." She stared at the flyer for a long time, her finger tracing the outline of her caged bird. Then she looked at me, a flicker of the old Maya, the one before everything fell apart, in her eyes. "Okay," she said, "let's buy a water tower." The county administration building was a monument to beige bureaucracy. The air smelled of old paper and weak coffee. The woman behind the counter at the surplus office looked at us over the top of her glasses, her expression a mixture of pity and annoyance. "You're here for the auction?" she asked, her tone suggesting we had clearly wandered into the wrong place. "Lot 47, I said, sliding the crumpled flyer and a $5 bill across the counter. She stared at the money, then at us. "Honey, you understand this is a derelict structure. It's a liability. It'll cost a fortune to have it torn down." "We understand," I said, trying to sound like an adult, like someone who knew what he was doing. "We'll take our chances." She sighed, a long theatrical sound, and began typing on her keyboard with 2 fingers. The printer whirred to life and spat out a single sheet of paper. A deed. It was flimsy and official all at once. She stamped it with a heavy, satisfying thud, signed her name, and pushed it toward me. "It's yours," she said, her voice flat. "Good luck. You're going to need it." I picked up the paper. My name, Liam Carter, was printed on it. Owners. We owned something. We owned a piece of the world. It might have been a broken, forgotten piece, but it was ours. We walked out of that building and into the cold sunlight, a $5 deed in my pocket, and for the first time in a very long time, we had a direction. We were heading to Oakhaven. The bus ride to Oakhaven felt like a journey to another planet. We left the gray sprawl of the city behind, watching as it bled into endless suburbs, which in turn gave way to wide, empty fields sleeping under a blanket of frost. The bus was old, the seats were cracked vinyl, and the heater clanked and wheezed, but it was warm. Maya fell asleep against my shoulder, her breathing slow and even. For the first time in days, the tense lines around her eyes had relaxed. I stared out the window, watching the skeletal trees flash by, the deed a warm, crinkly square in my jacket pocket. I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. We had spent almost all our money on the bus tickets and some food, a bag of apples, a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter. We were heading toward a place we'd never seen, to a home that was probably nothing more than a pile of scrap metal. This could be the stupidest decision of my life. I could be leading my sister into something worse than the shelter, into cold and hunger, with no safety net at all. But then I looked down at the deed again. It was a promise. A flimsy $5 promise, but a promise nonetheless. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something. Oakhaven was less a town and more a memory of one. A single main street was lined with buildings whose brick facades were faded and crumbling. A few storefronts were still open, a diner, a hardware store, a dusty grocery, but most were boarded up, their windows like vacant eyes. The bus hissed to a stop in front of a peeling town hall sign and then pulled away, leaving us in a cloud of diesel fumes and profound silence. The air here was different. It was cleaner, colder, and smelled of wood smoke and pine. There was no one on the street. It felt like we had walked onto a movie set after the cast and crew had gone home. "Where is it?" Maya whispered, clutching the strap of her duffel bag. I pulled out the map from the county, a crude printout with our parcel circled in red. "Looks like it's about a mile out of town. That way." I pointed down a narrow road that branched off Main Street and disappeared into a thick stand of pine trees. The walk was cold. The silence was broken only by the crunch of our footsteps on the gravel shoulder and the rustle of the wind in the bare branches of the trees. With every step, the knot of anxiety in my stomach tightened. What were we walking toward? What had we actually bought for $5? And then we saw it. Cresting a small hill, we looked out over a rolling field, and there it stood, a skeletal giant against the pale gray sky. The water tower. It was bigger than I had imagined, 100 feet of rusted steel legs supporting a massive cylindrical tank. The paint, once probably a cheerful municipal blue, had peeled and flaked away, leaving leprous patches of angry orange rust. It looked ancient and sad, like the forgotten relic of a forgotten civilization. Next to it, huddled in its shadow, was the pump house. It was a small, squat brick building with a sagging roof and a single boarded-up window. This was it. Our property, our home. Maya stopped beside me, her eyes wide. I couldn't read her expression. Was it fear? Disappointment? "It's big," she said finally. "Yeah," I breathed. "It is." We walked the rest of the way in silence, our boots sinking into the damp, cold earth. As we got closer, the scale of it became overwhelming. The steel legs were thick as tree trunks, crisscrossed with braces and ladders that led up into the sky. The rust wasn't just a color. It had a texture, a deep, scaly corrosion that looked like it could crumble at a touch. We circled the base, our heads craned back, feeling like ants at the foot of a skyscraper. The pump-house door was secured with a thick, rusty padlock. Of course it was. I pulled on it, but it wouldn't budge. A wave of despair washed over me. We had come all this way, spent all our money, only to be locked out of the one small part of our property that might offer shelter. We were going to freeze out here. It was a stupid, childish plan, and we were going to pay the price. I sank down onto the cold ground, my head in my hands. We had failed. "Liam." Maya's voice was soft but firm. I looked up. She was holding a large, jagged rock, about the size of a loaf of bread. Her expression was set, determined. "Stand back," she said. She swung the rock with all her strength, a grunt of effort escaping her lips. It hit the padlock with a loud metallic clang that echoed in the quiet air. Nothing. She swung again, and again. On the fourth swing, there was a sharp crack, and the rusted shackle of the lock snapped. The door swung inward with a low, groaning creak, opening into darkness. I stared at her, stunned. A small, fierce smile touched her lips. "See?" she said. "Not so hard." We stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of damp concrete, old oil, and decay. A single beam of light cut through the gloom from a crack in the roof, illuminating a universe of swirling dust motes. The space was small, maybe 15 by 15 feet. In the center was a massive, hulking piece of machinery, the old pump, covered in a shroud of cobwebs. The floor was concrete, stained and cracked. In one corner, a pile of greasy rags was slowly decomposing. It was cold, it was dirty, it was empty. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It was a room that was ours. No one could tell us to leave. We spent the rest of the afternoon making it habitable. We swept the floor with a stiff, old broom we found in a corner. We used some of our clothes to plug the crack in the roof. We laid out our sleeping bags on the cleanest patch of concrete. It wasn't much, but as the sun began to set, casting long, spooky shadows through the open doorway, it started to feel like a refuge. We ate our peanut butter and bread sitting on the floor, watching the sky turn from gray to purple to a deep, star-dusted black. It was cold, colder than the shelter. But it was a different kind of cold. It was our cold. That night, sleep didn't come easily. The wind howled around the tower, making the steel legs groan and sing a mournful, lonely song. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig outside made me jump. But Maya, for the first time I could remember, slept soundly. As I lay there, listening to the symphony of our strange new home, my foot bumped against something loose on the floor. A floorboard? No, the floor was concrete. I sat up and felt around in the dark. Near the wall, under the pile of rags I'd swept away, one of the concrete paving slabs was loose. My heart started to beat faster. I wedged my fingers into the crack and pulled. It was heavy, but it lifted. Beneath it was a dark, square hole. Reaching inside, my fingers brushed against cold metal. I pulled it out. It was a box, a heavy metal lockbox, about the size of a shoebox, and it was locked. Hope and frustration warred within me. A locked box. It felt like a cruel joke. We had no tools, no way to open it. I spent an hour trying to pry it open with the broken broom handle, trying to smash the lock with Maya's rock, but it was solid steel. Defeated, I shoved it back into the hole and tried to sleep. The next morning, we searched the pump house with a new intensity. We were no longer just looking for shelter, we were on a treasure hunt. We tapped every brick, checked every pipe, sifted through every pile of debris. Nothing. Finally, I was running my hand along the underside of a thick, greasy pipe that ran along the wall when my fingers caught on something. Tape. A small, flat object was taped to the bottom of the pipe, hidden from view. I peeled it loose. It was a key, an old iron key, heavy and ornate. My hands were shaking as I retrieved the box. I slid the key into the lock. It was stiff, but with a grunt of effort, I turned it. It was a loud, satisfying click. I lifted the lid. The first thing I saw was money. Stacks of it, 20s and 50s, bound with rubber bands. My mind couldn't even process it at first. It looked like more money than I had ever seen in my life. Beneath the cash was a thick stack of envelopes. tied together with a faded blue ribbon. And on top of the envelopes was a single, dog-eared photograph. It was a picture of a man with a kind, wrinkled face and a familiar smile, standing proudly in front of a half-built house. I recognized him instantly, though I hadn't seen him in over a decade. It was our grandfather. Maya, who had been watching silently over my shoulder, let out a small gasp. "Grandpa?" she whispered. He had died when I was 6, or so we'd been told. After our parents left. We were told he had nothing, that he couldn't take us. We were wards of the state. It was a story we had been told so many times we had stopped questioning it. Yet, here he was. And here was a box full of money and letters, hidden under the floor of a pump house we had bought for $5. I picked up the top envelope. My name was written on it in a shaky but clear hand. Liam, to be opened first. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, filled with that same handwriting. I began to read aloud, my voice cracking. "My dearest Liam," it began. "If you are reading this, then I am long gone, and the world has been as unkind to you and your sister as I feared it would be. I am so sorry. I am sorry for not being there, for letting you think I abandoned you. The truth is, I never did. When your parents got into their trouble, the state said I wasn't a fit guardian. They said I was too old, too poor. They took you, and it broke my heart. I fought for you, son, but the system is a machine, and it grinds people up. They wouldn't let me see you, wouldn't even let me write. So I started to make a plan, a crazy, long-shot plan." I paused, taking a shaky breath. Maya had her hand on my arm, her knuckles white. "I knew they would move you around," the letter continued. "I knew you would eventually age out with nothing. So I started saving every penny I made from my carpentry work. I bought this piece of land, this forgotten tower, because it was cheap and no one wanted it. No one would ever look for anything here. It's not much, but it's yours, free and clear. I put this money here for you. It should be about $5,000. It's not a fortune, but it's a start. Use it for food, for tools, for whatever you need to make a stand right here. Don't run. This land is your inheritance. But it's more than just land, Liam. There are other things hidden here. Truths. This tower holds a secret, and the rest of these letters will guide you. Don't trust the first offer that comes your way. People will want this land, but it is worth more than their money. It is your story, your foundation. Be strong for your sister. I love you both more than words can say. Your loving grandfather, Thomas." I finished reading, and the small pump house was silent, save for the sound of our breathing. I looked at Maya. Tears were streaming down her face, but she was smiling. It was a real smile, the first I'd seen in years. She wasn't the only one crying. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, smearing dirt across my face. He hadn't abandoned us. All these years, we had felt like driftwood, cut loose and forgotten. But he had been there, in the background, working, planning, leaving us a lifeline. This rusted tower wasn't a random, desperate purchase. It was a destination. It was a legacy. I carefully counted the money. It was $5,240. To us, it was the riches of a king. We weren't just two homeless kids anymore. We were landowners. We had a home, a mission, and a mystery to solve. We had a grandfather who had loved us. For the first time, the howling wind outside didn't sound lonely. It sounded like a song, and we were finally ready to learn the words. The next few days were a blur of purpose. We used $100 of our inheritance to buy supplies from the hardware store in town. The owner, a grizzled man named Mr. Henderson with flour-dusted overalls, gave us a long, curious look, but didn't ask any questions when we bought a heavy-duty tarp, a propane heater, work gloves, and a crowbar. We were just 2 more kids from the backwoods, as far as he was concerned. The propane heater was a miracle. For the first time, we were warm. The small pump house became our base, our fortress. We patched the roof with the tarp, swept every last bit of grime from the floor, and organized our meager belongings. It began to feel less like a shelter and more like a camp, a home. During the day, we explored. The tower itself was a vertical puzzle. The ladder was missing its first 20 feet, a deliberate act of sabotage, I guessed. But our grandfather's letters were our guide. The second letter, which I opened on our 3rd day, was cryptic. The heart of the giant is hollow, but its strength is in its bones. Look for my mark where the sun sets. For hours we circled the base of the tower, examining every rivet, every steel beam. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting the tower in a long, dramatic shadow, Maya saw it. On the westernmost leg, about 5 feet up, was a small, crudely carved T.C. Thomas Carter. There, she breathed. We scraped away the dirt and rust around the carving. Beneath it was a loose bolt. It took both of us, using the crowbar, to work it free. When it finally came loose, it didn't just come out. A small hinged plate in a steel leg swung open, revealing a hollow compartment inside. And nestled within that compartment was another bundle, wrapped in oilcloth. Inside was a set of architectural blueprints, a small leather-bound journal, and another letter. This letter was different. It was less emotional, more practical. "Liam," it read, "this is the real plan. This tower isn't a monument, it's a house. Or it can be. These are my designs. I was a carpenter, not an architect, so they're rough, but they're sound. The tank can be converted into 2 floors of living space. It's got the best view in the county. The journal contains all my notes, my calculations, the list of materials you'll need. This won't be easy. It will take work, more work than you can imagine. But everything you need to start is here. Learn to read these plans. Learn to build. Your hands can save you when nothing else will." We unrolled the blueprints on the floor of the pump house. They were beautiful. Detailed drawings showed how to cut windows into the massive steel tank, how to build a spiral staircase up the center, how to frame out a small kitchen, 2 bedrooms, a living space. It was a home suspended in the sky. My grandfather hadn't just left us a piece of land, he had left us a blueprint for a future. A crazy, impossible, beautiful future. Maya traced the lines of the drawings with her finger, her eyes alight with a fire I hadn't seen since she was a little girl. She, who could draw anything, was mesmerized. "We could do this," she whispered, more to herself than to me. "We could actually build this." The idea was still terrifying. We were just kids. We didn't know the first thing about construction. But looking at those plans, at the hope in my sister's face, I started to believe. Maybe we could. It was 2 days later when the car appeared. A sleek black sedan that looked completely alien, parked at the edge of our field. A man in a crisp, expensive suit got out and walked toward us, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the soft earth. He had a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and a leather briefcase clutched in one hand. "Liam and Maya Carter?" he asked, his voice smooth as honey. "My name is Julian Vance. I'm with Viridian Development." I immediately felt a chill, remembering my grandfather's warning. Don't trust the first offer that comes your way. I stood in front of Maya, putting myself between her and this stranger. "What do you want?" I asked. "I'll be direct," he said, his smile widening. "My company is acquiring land in this area for a new residential project. This parcel, believe it or not, is smack in the middle of our master plan. We'd like to buy it from you." He looked from us to the rusting tower, a look of faint disgust on his face. "Frankly, we'd be doing you a favor. This thing is an eyesore and a safety hazard. The county will likely condemn it and force you to pay for demolition, which would cost you a fortune." He opened his briefcase. "However, we are prepared to make you a very generous offer. We'll take this liability off your hands for $50,000, cash." $50,000. The number hung in the air, shimmering. It was an impossible sum of money. It was a ticket out. An apartment, new clothes, food security, maybe even a chance to go back to school properly. It was everything a normal life was supposed to be. It was the easy way out. I saw Maya's eyes widen. I could feel the pull of it myself, a gravitational force threatening to suck all our crazy dreams into a black hole of practicality. $50,000. We could be safe. We could be normal. "Think about it," Vance said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "No more squatting in this filthy shed. A real home, a real life. All you have to do is sign one little paper." He slid a contract out of his briefcase. The temptation was immense. It felt like a physical weight pressing down on me. I thought about the cold nights, the uncertainty, the sheer back-breaking work laid out in my grandfather's journal. We could just walk away from all of it. We could take the money and disappear, start over somewhere new, where no one knew us as the foster kids, the runaways. But then I looked at the tower. It wasn't just an eyesore to me anymore. It was a promise. It was our grandfather's last stand. It was the only thing in the world that was truly ours. Selling it would be like selling his memory. It would be like admitting that he was wrong, that we were just victims of the system after all, and that the best we could hope for was a cash payout for our own history. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that my grandfather didn't raise us, even from a distance, to take the easy way out. You know, life presents you with these moments, these forks in the road where one path is paved and well lit, and the other is a dark, overgrown trail leading into the woods. Every sensible part of you screams to take the easy path. But sometimes your heart, your soul, knows that everything you're meant to be is waiting for you down that dark trail. If you've made it this far in our story, maybe you faced a choice like that too. A moment where you had to choose between what was easy and what was right, between security and a dream that everyone else called impossible. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to make a choice that defined you. Because what we did next defined us forever. I looked from the contract in Vance's hand to the tower, then to Maya. Her eyes met mine, and in them I saw the same conflict, the same fear, but also the same stubborn spark of hope. She gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. That was all I needed. I turned back to Julian Vance, and for the first time in my life, I felt tall. "No," I said. My voice didn't shake. "The property is not for sale." Vance's smile faltered. He blinked, as if he hadn't heard me correctly. "I'm sorry, what was that?" "I don't think you understand. This is a once-in-a-lifetime offer." "We understand perfectly," I said, gaining confidence. "The answer is no. This is our home." His face hardened, the charming facade melting away to reveal something cold and ugly underneath. "You're making a huge mistake, kid," he snarled. "You and your little sister. This isn't a game. We will get this land. You can take the easy way, or you can take the hard way. But either way, you will lose." He snatched the contract back, shoved it in his briefcase, and stalked back to his car, leaving a trail of crushed grass and impotent fury in his wake. The black sedan sped away, spitting gravel. We were left in the sudden silence, our hearts pounding. We had done it. We had faced the dragon and refused to bow. We were terrified, and we were free. The next letter in the stack was short. "If a man in a suit comes knocking, don't talk to him. Go see Aris Thorne in town. He's a lawyer. More importantly, he was my friend. Tell him Thomas Carter sent you. He holds the rest of your inheritance." The next morning, we walked into town and found the office of Aris Thorne, attorney at law. It was a small, dusty office above the hardware store. The man behind the desk was older, with a kind face and tired eyes. He looked up as we entered, his expression wary. "Can I help you?" he asked. "We're here to see Mr. Thorne," I said. "I'm Aris Thorne." "Our grandfather sent us," I said, my voice quiet. "Thomas Carter." The change in the man's expression was immediate. The weariness in his eyes was replaced by a sharp, focused attention. He stood up and gestured to the two worn chairs in front of his desk. "Sit down," he said, his voice suddenly gentle. "Tell me everything." We did. We told him about being kicked out, about the shelter, the flyer, the $5 deed. We showed him the box, the money, the blueprints, and the letters. He listened patiently, nodding occasionally, his gaze fixed on us. When we were finished, he leaned back in his chair and let out a long, slow breath. "I'll be damned," he said softly. "The old fox actually did it." He unlocked a large safe in the corner of his office and pulled out a thick, leather-bound portfolio. "Your grandfather was a remarkable man," Mr. Thorne explained, opening the portfolio. "He knew the system had failed you. He also knew Viridian Development had been trying to buy up this whole valley for years, using strong-arm tactics and low-ball offers. Your parcel is the linchpin. Without it, their whole project stalls." He laid out a series of legal documents on the desk. "Thomas set up a trust for you two. This land, the tower, it's all protected. Viridian can't touch it. He also left you this." He pushed a passbook across the desk. "It's a savings account. He put money in it every month for 10 years. It's not a fortune, but it's enough. Enough to fight with." The balance in the passbook was over $30,000. I stared at it, speechless. Our grandfather hadn't just left us a home. He had left us an arsenal. Mr. Thorne became our general. He filed the paperwork for our emancipation, using the trust and the property to prove we were self-sufficient. He sent a blistering cease and desist letter to Viridian Development that made Julian Vance's threats sound like playground taunts. For the first time, we weren't just two kids against the world. We had an ally. We had a plan. And we had the resources to see it through. The work began in earnest. The first step was making the pump house a real, livable space. With money from the trust, we bought lumber, insulation, and a small wood-burning stove. Mr. Henderson from the hardware store, who had become a quiet supporter, taught me the basics of framing a wall. Maya, poring over the blueprints, designed a clever layout with built-in bunks and storage. We worked from sun-up to sundown. My hands, once soft, became calloused and strong. We learned the language of tape measures and levels, of saws and hammers. Slowly, painstakingly, the dusty brick shell transformed. We had light. We had warmth. We had a real door with a real lock. The community, which had at first watched us with suspicion, began to thaw. The woman from the diner, a cheerful, bustling lady named Sarah, started leaving us a hot meal on the steps of the pump house every other day. An old farmer from down the road dropped off a load of firewood with a silent nod. They were small gestures, but to us they were everything. They were an anchor in a world that had always been adrift. But the tower loomed over us, a constant reminder of the real challenge ahead. It was one thing to fix up a small brick building. It was another thing entirely to turn a 100-foot steel tank into a home. We spent weeks just clearing the land around the base and studying the blueprints, trying to wrap our heads around the monumental task. Viridian didn't give up. They started a campaign of harassment. We'd find our supplies tampered with. Survey stakes would appear on our land overnight. They filed frivolous complaints with the county about safety violations, forcing us to deal with inspectors and paperwork. It was a war of attrition. They were trying to wear us down, to make the fight so exhausting that we would finally give up and take their money. There were days when I was ready to. Days when I was so tired and sore and frustrated that selling out felt like a sweet relief. But then I would look at Maya. She was thriving. The quiet, withdrawn girl from the shelter was gone. In her place was a confident young woman, covered in sawdust, her sketchbook filled not with caged birds, but with detailed drawings of support beams and window fittings. This project wasn't just building a home. It was rebuilding my sister, and I would not let anyone take that away from her. We hired a local crew, a father and son team of welders, to do the heavy structural work we couldn't handle. They used a crane to lift a massive steel ring, which they welded to the inside of the tank to support the first floor. Then came the most terrifying and exhilarating day, cutting the windows. Using plasma torches, they carved huge rectangular openings into the curved steel walls. For the first time, light flooded the dark, cavernous space. Suddenly, it wasn't a tank anymore. It was a room with a view that stretched for miles, over the golden fields and the green spine of the distant mountains. We found the final letter from our grandfather tucked into the binding of his journal. I saved it, waiting for the right moment. I opened it one evening after the welders had gone home, sitting with Maya on the newly installed subfloor of our future living room, our legs dangling over the edge, 100 feet in the air. The sunset painted the sky in strokes of orange and purple. "My dear children," the final letter read, "if you are reading this, you are sitting inside my dream. Your dream. I hope you are proud of what you've built. I am. I need to tell you the truth about your parents. They weren't bad people. They were just lost. They made some terrible choices, got mixed up with dangerous people over debts. The reason I couldn't take you wasn't just because the state said no. It was to protect you. If I had taken you in, those people would have come looking for you. By letting you go into the system, by disappearing from your lives, I made you invisible. It was the hardest thing I have ever had to do. It felt like cutting off a part of my own soul. This tower, this land, this was my penance. My way of building you a fortress they could never touch. A place where you would be safe and free. Don't live in the shadow of their mistakes. Don't live in the shadow of my absence. Live in the light. Fill this home with laughter and love. That is the only inheritance that truly matters. I'll be watching. Love, Grandpa. The paper was stained with what could have been water or tears. We sat there in silence for a long time, watching the stars come out, feeling the ghost of his love all around us. He hadn't abandoned us. He had protected us in the only way he knew how. He had traded his own happiness for our safety. And he had given us this, a second chance built of steel and sacrifice. That was 3 years ago. I'm telling you this story from a comfortable chair in our living room, 100 feet in the air. The view is, as my grandfather promised, the best in the county. A spiral staircase, which Maya and I built ourselves, winds its way up through the center of our home. The walls are insulated and paneled with warm, reclaimed wood. We have a small, functional kitchen, a bathroom with a composting toilet, and 2 cozy, circular bedrooms on the floor above. We get our power from a field of solar panels and our water from a well we had drilled. It's not a conventional home, but it's more of a home than any place I have ever known. Viridian Development eventually gave up. Their project fell apart after a local newspaper reporter got wind of their harassment campaign and wrote a scathing expose. Our little tower became a local symbol of defiance. Maya is 18 now. She graduated high school with top honors and won a scholarship to study architecture at the state university. Her portfolio, filled with designs for unconventional homes, blew them away. She comes home on weekends, and we talk about adding a balcony or maybe a greenhouse on the roof. As for me, I found my calling. I got my contractor's license. I work with Mr. Henderson at the hardware store, and I run a small business on the side, helping people in the community with repairs and small building projects. People around here trust me. They know I know what it means to build something from nothing. This tower is more than just our house. It's a testament. It's a reminder that home isn't something you're given. It's something you build. It's a reminder that sometimes the things the world throws away as junk are the most valuable things of all. It taught me that inheritance isn't about money or property. It's about the stories we carry and the love that is strong enough to reach across time and build a shelter for the ones who come after. This journey wasn't just about building a house. It was about rebuilding our lives from the foundation up. It was about taking a story of abandonment and loss and turning it into a story of resilience and hope. We all have our own water towers, those impossible, rusted-out dreams that everyone else tells us to tear down. The challenges that seem too big to overcome. But I'm here to tell you that with a little bit of hope, a lot of hard work, and the love of the people who came before you, you can build a home anywhere. You can find your foundation even when you feel most lost. Thank you for listening to our story. If it resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight for your own place in the world, please consider subscribing. This channel is for people like us, people who know that the most beautiful things are often the ones we have to build ourselves. Share your own story of transformation in the comments below. I promise I read every one. You are not alone in your struggle, and you are not alone in your strength. Remember that. Be well and keep building.